Thanks so much for clicking play and joining me for this episode of She Got Next. My guest today is Jessie Katz. She's the head of iHeart Women's Sports Network, the first audio network solely devoted to women's sports. If you don't know, now you know. They have more than 20 podcasts hosted by industry pros, insiders, athletes, journalists that have been about this. Jessie and I talk about the when, what, and hows of the network and why she grew up hating Sheryl Swoops. Don't worry. In response to this question about how you decide whether or not to approach potentially controversial topics, you said this: our network is like an act of resistance. We are platforming voices that people are looking to silence right now. We have incredibly strong feminist voices. We have a lot of Black women hosting our shows, queer women hosting our shows. And so being able to amplify that is what gives me peace of mind. Again, you're about like well, now you can understand. I was like, what? This is why I want to talk to her. Yeah. Does it still feel like an act of resistance, you existing?
Oh, yeah. Yes, definitely. More so than probably when I said that, just because we've continued to add those kinds of voices to the network. And, our world and our political climate and our kind of social friction we all engage with every day has only increased since we launched the network almost 2 years ago now. So I would say it feels even bolder to do what we're doing and feels even more important every new day that we endeavor in this crazy thing we're trying here.
Well, tell me a little bit about the resistance, like existing during this climate. Feels again like you're fighting back against what the reality is, the bigger that reality that we're all living in. But other particular conversations, brands, individuals who want to be part of this growing network, but are feeling afraid to put their voices and their identity out there and connect with you all in a way that's very public.
Yeah, I mean, no, I would say the voices we're working with are people who aren't afraid, but who were looking to partner with a platform that was going to let them do what they do best, which is to speak their mind on topics that they're extremely knowledgeable about and have very educated opinions about. So, I mean, a good recent example of that is just a few months ago, we launched a new show with Cari and Jemele Hill called Flagrant and Funny. And, they're two amazing talent who I had wanted to pair together for a long time. They're best friends in real life. They've done things on camera and on air together before. And I wanted to be able to bring them together in our network. I had worked with Cari on some limited series that we had done. I hadn't worked with Jemele yet, although she had another show with iHeart. But Cari called me one day and she was like, Jemele and I feel ready to do another thing together. And I was like, I've been waiting for this call. And, they wanted to be rooted in women's sports, but to also be able to talk about men's sports or other big things that were popping up in the culture. It's 3 times a week. So they have a lot of time to talk about what they want to talk about every week. And she was kind of feeling me out for the parameters or the kind of boundaries they needed to be sensitive about.
Security. And she said, would you ask a man that question?
Yes.
I absolutely ask a man that question.
Record, 100%.
So here is where I am. If we are going to be covering women's sports, and do we delicately get into these uncomfortable conversations or do we rip the Band-Aid off?
They can talk about anything and they will. And, Cari's on CNN every week talking to Abby Phillips about who knows what's going on in the world. And I said, you know what? You guys do what you want to do. If there's a problem, I'll talk to you about it, but let me worry about that. And you just have the conversations you want to have. And I think that's what talent are really looking for. And I think that's kind of traditionally been the power of podcasting, is that it feels like a more free space, a more unedited space. It's something that iHeart is really known for, of just like platforming really exciting voices and giving them free reign to do their thing. It's part of my job as the executive to be mindful that we have a lot of stakeholders. We work with a lot of brands. Everyone has their own sensitivities and things we need to be careful of. But our talent are really responsible. They're pros. Like, most of them have been doing this for a long time. They know how to do that dance, and occasionally they'll say something people don't like, and that's their prerogative. That's why we give them a microphone to speak their mind, and not everyone has to agree with it all the time. But it all comes from a place of genuinely wanting to have important conversations to move the culture forward, to move women's sports forward. And so as long as I know that they're all coming from that space, I'm happy to let them talk.
Well, you put it in a way that makes me think of the challenges and the opportunities working with brands. You said there's a dance that they have to do.
Totally.
Now, when you launched this network, you talked about the fact that there are a lot of brands out there that were looking for opportunities to invest in the voices talking about women's sports. So it was like, we want to put money into this. We want to maybe even make it balanced. We pour as much into women's sports as we do into men's sports, but there just was an inventory.
Right.
And now it's people are looking all over the place. We want to show, it's like the Oprah effect. And I always wonder if kids these days even know what we're saying when we're like, you get a car, you get a car. Like, do you know what the origin story is?
No idea.
They have no idea. But it's you get a show. But there's still ideas around what brands want to associate themselves with, right? It's not just like we want to throw money at anything because women's sports is booming. They do have particular goals in mind. They want to attach themselves in particular ways.
Yeah.
A few months ago, I talked to Sarah Bergstrom. She's the COO of Together. And we talked about that iconic shirt. Everybody watches women's sports.
Right.
And I said to her at the time, I'm like, when you all launched, I mean, I thought that was a great slogan, but it just wasn't true. Most of the people who were watching women's sports were dudes.
Yeah.
You kind of spoke it into existence
right.
that more people, and especially more women, were watching sports. And I would imagine it's the same case for men who are listening to sports talk. It's mostly them. They're listening to male voices. And so when you are hearing from brands saying, we want to invest in the thoughts and opinions, people breaking down the game, it's finding the audience,
right.
understanding whether or not they exist and to what percentage it's women and men, and then finding the leaders, the talent to do it. So it's a long question, a long setup to say, talk to me a little bit about that data. But saying we need these voices to be heard. We want to talk about these leagues, these teams, these athletes. But one, again, the inventory wasn't there, and it was mostly leaning towards men.
Right. Yeah, it's true. It's interesting. Like, Sarah Spain was the first show that we launched, her daily women's sports show called Good Game with Sarah Spain. And Sarah comes from years of on-air networking with ESPN, ESPNW, but like a lot of her fanship is from ESPN. And when I say networking, I mean anchoring for the network. And so a lot of her following was male. So she brought them over to our network. And so at the beginning, our network was kind of skewing heavily male. And it was really funny because it wasn't what we were expecting for launching a women's sports network. But it was nice because she brought this built-in audience with her. And we liked feeling like these men were coming over and suddenly being exposed to nothing but women's sports content. But then as more women's sports fans started to hear about the show, they started listening and things started evening out. And we, launched more and more shows since then. We're up to about 20 podcasts in our network now. And so now I think we lean a little more female than male, but it's still pretty evenly split, which I really love and I'm proud of. And I think, brands, they all have their different objectives, but I think what they're looking for is how to align themselves in this space. Because a lot of them were given this remit, like go figure out how to invest in women's sports. So we open up this inventory for them, but it's not just the inventory. It's like, how do they align with platforms who bring integrity and authenticity? Because women's sports fans, like they've been in the trenches alone for a long time. They've been following, they've been craving this content, supporting this content, but feeling very alone, not supported. Brands weren't there. Communities were hard to find. And a lot of the voices we brought into our network, people like Sarah Spain, are OGs who have been talking about this for a long time. And so those fans really trust them. And so it means something for someone like Sarah Spain to report on women's sports because she's coming from a place of education and investment. Like she's really in it for the right reasons.
All right, I have some thoughts about that Trump phone call to the U.S. men's hockey team. And I said this on my show too, but I want to share it here. Just how quickly men's hockey spoiled a moment of patriotism and unity and goodwill. Just a brief moment that we all shared. Almost instantly spoiled it, and all the goodwill from heated rivalry and the great conversations around hockey. And I think those of us familiar with a lot of men's hockey culture aren't surprised, but can still be disappointed.
And she loves it. She wants to grow it. She knows what she's talking about. And then when she brings brands into the conversation and she vouches for them, that means a lot too. Like, she's already very trusted by her listeners. So I think they're more open to hearing about the brands that are partnering with someone like Sarah. And we've seen from our research then that does lends increased affinity to the brands that are partnering with our network because of that. So we very quickly saw those results for the brands that came in. And that's why we've been able to just add more and more partners since we launched. It really is working.
Well, I have to say, you talked about the fact that there are a lot of women's sports fans that have been craving community. One thing that I hear constantly is the fact that women's sports fans, I should say women who are women's sports fans, really appreciate the in real life experiences. They like community, they like the diversity, they like to feel welcomed. And I wonder if, thinking about the demographics of your audience, and in addition to that in real life experience, it's also the fact that you said, like, they've been in the trenches.
Yeah.
And they're now being exposed to opportunities to listen to lots of different voices talking about lots of different sports, but it felt grassroots. They felt very connected to it, right? Like, this is my team, this is my city.
Right.
These are conversations that we've held close and protected. And now that there are so many brands that are interested in it, it's a dance that you have to perform to make sure it feels like a genuine connection, and something that might be just a weird worry of mine. And I don't know if it's appropriate for even me to even ask you of this because of the position that you have. Again, because people feel so connected to these teams, these brands, these athletes, it worries me. It worries me that leagues and platforms and brands are so anxious to take advantage of the fact that so much money is flowing. And I love that for us. This is a good problem for us to have.
Sure.
But there are a lot of organizations, individuals, billionaires that are buying in to these leagues and teams. And they are people who are not emotionally and financially invested in our individual success as women. Yes, they want to put their logo on a kit. But what are they doing economically? What are they doing in communities? How are they lobbying legislators? The things that they're doing are very detrimental to the women on the pitch, on the field, on the ice, the women in the stands and who are fans. So now, again, as someone like you and others who are in a position to kind of navigate these relationships, you've got to be cautious. As much as you want that money, because the spotlight is on you now, not all money is good money, right? Black people say not all skin folk are kinfolk. Not all money is good money. And so there's that dance that you have to perform. And I'm wondering the thought process and the vetting that you all have to go through to make sure this makes sense.
It's a really good question. I mean, I can tell you that our talent are very involved in the vetting process. So any brand that's interested in coming into the network, or any brand that our team is interested in pitching to, we talk to the talent about it and we ask them if they're aligned and what kind of partnership they would be comfortable doing with that brand. You know, do they want to just do a straight read? Would they be comfortable sponsoring, vouching for something? If they have reservations, we're totally open to that. You know, our talent definitely have turned down partnerships that they just don't feel aligned, don't feel authentic to them. So we really give them a lot of leeway with that. It's something that we even build into our contracts with our talent. Like, they have total freedom. They can't turn down 100% of the sponsors because we need to generate revenue for the network. But yeah, like, if they occasionally say, you know what, it doesn't feel right for me, then we're totally open to that. And, you know, they often have more insight into that than I do. Our sales team certainly does. Cause again, like, they've been in the space for so long, and people like Jemele or Sarah or Cari, like, they really have valuable insight into which brands are in it in a genuine way, or their company values align with the values that we espouse on our shows. And so I take their opinion very seriously.
Something that I read about, a quote that you gave talking about brands. They're not just running spots and dots, but we're working with their talent. We're launching shows with them. We're able to provide this 360 partnership with those brands. Is there an example of a brand that you're working with, or you're like, this is the model, this is the cut and paste that we want to do, that aligns really well with talent, with the messaging, with the conversation, and where we want to take the platform as a whole?
Yeah. So like one of our founding partners is Novartis, a pharmaceutical company. And the main product that they have been working with us to talk about and promote since we launched is a breast cancer drug. And that was just such an easy alignment with so much of our talent. I mean, basically any of our talent was open to talking about it. Some of them, it feels like a very like special cause close to their heart because they've dealt with it themselves. They have relatives who have faced this. And so, we're happy to read ads for it, but also we do custom segments or branded episodes where we have on survivors, we have on doctors to really dig into it. And then Novartis has also sponsored live events for us where we, for example, at NWSL Championship last year, they sponsored a wellness brunch with a live podcast taping that Sarah Spain did. And so, we held a yoga class there, and it all just felt very organically integrated into our content and things that our talent cares about. So, when you hear pharmaceutical, you don't always think, oh, that's going to be like an easy, natural brand to work with. But that particular one and the causes that they wanted us to talk about with them, it was kind of so easy, like a no-brainer. So we're looking for more partnerships like that we can show up in different spaces. And like you said, it's not just the spots and dots, it's something much bigger.
That's what I think has been so great about this evolution of how brands are working with a lot of these sports teams and leagues. It is, sponsoring content and for whatever you're creating, if it's a podcast or some kind of live conversation, but then extending it beyond that by having opportunities for people to gather. Again, that's what's I think is so unique about women's sports fans. It's much more about being together and community. Yes, they're going to wear the colors. Yes, they're going to cheer on their team, right. But it's also like the vibe that is brought to that space that's really important to them.
Exactly.
You talked about some of the big names that you have on the network, Jemele, Cari. I'm saying their first names like we're homies.
Yeah.
And Sarah. But talk to me a little bit about the ways in which you find talent, develop talent, and platform them. I mean, yes, there are going to be some names like the ones we just described or listed that are bringing their audience to you. But there are other types of people that are out there who've been in the game for a while. And I wonder like what that balance is, if there is any at all, at discovering talent and focusing on those folks who've kind of been in the trenches who are looking for opportunities to participate in a platform like yours.
Totally. The way that we find talent is so open. Like there's some talent that I pursue or our partners will bring in. We have this partnership with Deep Blue Sports and Entertainment, which is incredible. They've made a lot of great introductions for us. And then sometimes like talent just approaches us either like at an event or they reach out and maybe they're not someone that would have been on our radar, but when they tell us what they're working on, I mean, it's a good example of this. One of our latest launches was a podcast called Good Luck With That, which is about women in skateboarding. And this podcast is hosted by several women who have been in skateboarding either on the marketing side or are skaters themselves, retired or current. And this is like a totally, not just underrepresented, but like unrepresented space. Totally male dominated in conversation and practice. And so, it's not like a category that we went chasing when we launched the network. But when they approached us, it's like, you know what? That would be really incredible. And we know there are like such dedicated fans and also brands that spend a lot of money in that space. I mean, one of our skaters, Nora Vasconcellos, who hosts the podcast, has an Adidas named after her. Like these are heavy hitters in their space. So it seemed like it was definitely worthwhile to try that out and see. So we just launched that show a few months ago. And then, there are other journalists who, maybe like aren't household names like some of the others we've discussed so far, but like Tarika Foster-Brasby is a great one who's been a W reporter for a long time. She's a sideline reporter for the Connecticut Sun going into her last season with them before they moved to Houston. And so she's like a really trusted voice in the space. A lot of more local fans know her very well. And we were looking for someone to co-host a podcast with Sheryl Swoops for our network, which is one of the first shows we launched. And Sheryl knew Tarika and was a fan of hers. And so we thought we could pair them together because you have this iconic, like the goat of all goats of women's basketball. And then someone who like just knows the sport really well and is a fan of Sheryl's and is really a trusted source to talk about women's basketball. That seemed like a really smart pairing there. So yeah, we really just go about it all different ways. And that's a nice thing about, we're not just a network of 1 or 2 shows and we check the box and said we're covering women's sports. Like, we have 20 shows now on the network, so we can take all different approaches and offer all sorts of angles on women's sports for all different sorts of fans.
Well, I imagine at some point, again, given the fact that brands are looking for this, you all are going to be moving beyond just broad conversations about in women's sports, even if it's within categories of it's skating, it's volleyball, it's basketball, to being locally focused, thinking about all of the ways in which men's sports are covered. Totally. Obviously, you have the big brands like ESPN, it's Fox, it's now Netflix, it's Amazon, and they're talking about all this. But then when you get to the local level, they're talking about specific teams, and they're talking, so I'm wondering if that is the goal in mind that you're thinking of. Like, we want to get so broad that every team's got a show. Every region has folks out there covering these teams in that way. I can't imagine you not wanting to move forward in that way.
Totally. We are having those conversations. We have been since we launched. We haven't done anything team specific yet, but we are trying to figure out the smartest way into that. There's so much opportunity there, especially because iHeart not just has the podcast component, but the broadcast side as well, where we can, promote shows in local markets, local sellers. So we're definitely looking at a way to capitalize on that. And also it's interesting because, we had reached out to some teams, like, we've had really exciting conversations with the New York Liberty, for example, to kind of understand their needs and wants and how we might be able to help them. But some teams have started reaching out to us now too, because, I'm sure we read like all these teams and universities even are starting to stand up their own little media businesses and centers and building their studios and kind of putting together their own content teams, because it's such a great way to platform and promote their talent and their programs. And so they're now coming to us saying like, A, could we potentially partner together? And B, do you just have any advice for us as we try to get into this? And I love having those conversations because I think it's so incredibly smart. And I think that the more teams and schools and programs that do that, the more they're really going to be able to harness their fan bases, but also create that community that we were saying everyone's really looking for, Exactly.
Now, obviously, like there's the listening aspect, there's the in real life, and then there's YouTube. Talk to me about like the design of all of that as well. Like
my new joke that not everyone loves to hear at an audio company like iHeart is that soon we're not going to be producing audio at all because everyone just wants video with captions. But sometimes it does feel that way. It's just the smart business move is to be everywhere where the audience is. And the RSS feed is king for us as an audio first company. But yes, like we also want to be on YouTube. So I would say most of our shows that we launch now have a YouTube component. Usually that means full episodes are also filmed for YouTube. At the very least, we are capturing video to create clips for social and YouTube shorts. And it's just kind of assumed at this point. I would say even when we launched 2 years ago, it was like, well, we'll take it case by case. And if there's like a strong reason to put something on YouTube, we'll consider it. Or if talent feels really strongly about it, we'll consider it. That has changed really quickly. And I go into every conversation assuming that the talent is going to want to be on YouTube. And if they don't, it's a nice surprise just because it makes production easier. And usually that's only if talent is like traveling a lot and they feel like they just don't want to deal with having to figure out nice lighting and whatever. It's just easier to do the audio only. But yeah, usually it's all of it. And I mean, again, it's smart for the network. It's just the best move. I would say about a year ago, I stopped even thinking of this as an audio network. And it's really like iHeart Women's Sports I now see as a brand. And it just has all these different arms. There's an audio arm. There's a video arm. There's a live event arm. There's a social arm. We're starting to get into the merch arm of it. Like you have to have all those spokes in the wheel if you want to stay competitive, if you want to find the biggest audiences that are out there, and if you want to attract the most exciting talent. Like, they don't want to limit themselves, especially as we start working with younger and younger talent who are so social first.
Yeah. Well, I like to close out the last few minutes. I'm already running over time, and if you need to stop me, I understand. But I like to ask 4 questions in the last 5 minutes.
Yeah.
Tell me about your first sports memory, or an early sports memory that turned you potentially into a fan.
Totally. So I was born and raised in Columbus, Ohio, and only child, and my father and my stepmother decided to become season ticket holders to the Ohio State women's basketball team when I was a kid, because they thought that would be just a great thing for me to grow up around and to see. And when I was about 9 or 10 years old, I became a ball girl for the team. And so I got to, wipe the sweat off the floor of my heroes like Katie Smith. And it was actually the funniest thing that when I joined iHeart, the first talent I met with was Sheryl Swoops, because she absolutely destroyed me when I was a kid, when she beat OSU in their only championship game when she was at Texas Tech. And so I've had a chip on my shoulder about her my entire life. And so in my first meeting with her, I got to tell her, and she apologized, and we've moved on, and now we're friends. So it's been very healing. My father still can't quite get over that I now am friends with Sheryl Swoops, but so that's an early, very formative memory, just instilled in me such a love of not just women's basketball, but just idolizing women athletes and just seeing them as such badasses. And they were always so kind and great, signing autographs, and felt very accessible. And I feel like women athletes still generally feel that way compared to other celebrities. I think it's something that has been so important to women's sports, to be able to survive, is to form those tight relationships with fans, right? To keep them feeling really invested. And I hope it's something that remains true in women's sports as it grows and becomes more and more of a successful business. I hope that athletes don't lose that investment that goes back into the fans.
I think that's what's so unique about sports, is because we all have an opportunity, or the majority of us have an opportunity to play when we're young.
Mm-hmm.
And when you have those memories of a team or an athlete that really kind of reached out to you, saw you in the crowd, through their jersey, it's lifelong.
Totally.
Like you said, you're holding on to this hate for Sheryl for a long time.
Exactly. I know.
But that's a great memory. What about a sports movie that you often quote, or is on rewind for you, constantly watching it?
So this is so obvious, and probably people that watch your show are so tired of hearing this one, but A League of Their Own, because I was a huge softball player, and so just that movie meant a lot to me. And I will say, we do a podcast in partnership with AUSL called Dropping Diamonds with AJ Andrews. And when they were having their inaugural opening day weekend last year, I flew to Chicago for it. And on the airplane, I watched A League of Their Own, because it just felt very appropriate to watch that on my way there. And I was crying on the plane, because I just remember watching that as a girl and feeling like, if only I could play professional baseball or softball, and it wasn't possible. And I just wanted that so badly. If I could have done anything at that age, I would have been a professional baseball player. And now we have a women's professional baseball league starting this summer too. So that was a real full circle thing to watch on the airplane flying to the, opening day weekend of a new professional women's softball league. So that remains a very poignant one for me.
That is one that is shouted out a lot. I think it's wild. There's certain touch points, certain movies, certain individuals, you just go back in time when you watch it, and the tears can flow all over again.
Exactly.
Tell me about a person. I always like to ask people to call out an individual or a couple of people who have helped them on their professional journey. People that you can call, I would not be doing what I'm doing right now, and the way that I'm doing it right now, had it not been for these folks pouring into me.
Totally. Oh, that's a good one. So there's a few, but so 15 years ago, I worked for The Hollywood Reporter, and I started as an assistant to the editor-in-chief, and then I started writing some for online and for the magazine. But what I did a lot there that I wasn't paid to do was argue about television with my colleagues. And we would just, debate whatever shows were in the zeitgeist. And Girls, I think, was in its second season, and that was like a hot topic in the office always. And one day, one of our editors, Erin Weinger, came over and she was like, if you guys are always going to be arguing about Girls, can we start recording it and like put it up on the site like a podcast? And I was like, that's funny, I guess. And so she let me start recording these debates with my colleagues every week about the show Girls. And then we would put it up on the site and I'd write a little article about it. And that became this podcast, which it was barely a podcast. We recorded it on SoundCloud and like we weren't running ads in it or anything. And The Hollywood Reporter hadn't done podcasts before. And this was very early days for podcasting anyway. But that became my first venture into audio. And from there, I started hosting some other shows for them. I started teaching other reporters how to record their interviews and post them as podcasts, and eventually got us onto a proper platform so that we could monetize it and grow it. And so if not for her coming over and saying like, let's turn this annoying thing you're doing all the time into a show, I don't know if I would have this career that I have today. So props to Erin. That was a big one.
And props to you for saying, okay. Like sometimes that stuff is scary. Like, well, I can talk to my friend, but
totally. Yeah.
The last question I like to ask is how you're creating space for the next generation of women in the industry. And obviously the platform itself, the network itself is pouring into women's sports fans, young and old. But are there particular things that you're doing on the daily that you can point to and say, I am making sure that whoever takes my space, the young woman who will take my job later on, feels welcome, feels informed, feels empowered?
I hope that I'm doing that largely in the work that I do with my team and the producers that I work with. Because I work with these incredible women who are so talented at producing and are fans of the women's game. And this is a brand new thing that those things have been able to be married. They usually, like, it just was impossible to think that your love for women's sports could translate into a job, especially in audio or media in general. But in podcasting, this feels very new. And so just like, I don't know, letting them shine, letting them build relationships with the talent themselves, letting them pitch ideas, letting them develop new shows. I'm just really proud of the work that my team's been able to do. And I just try to like let them do what they're great at and infuse their passion into the network.
I love to hear it. As I said, I'm super grateful for your time, for your insight, for the work that you're doing. I'm inspired to keep going myself.
Thank you for all your coverage. And I see the incredible guests you have on your show. You're talking to so many wonderful people who I admire and I get to work with occasionally. And it's such a great platform that you have. So thank you for that.
It's a hustle, Jessie. It's a hustle.
No, I know. I believe it. It's all a hustle, no matter if you're doing it alone or with a giant media company. We're all in the hustle. Thank you. I really appreciate you. And thanks for this lovely conversation. You're great at this, as you know, but this was a really wonderful conversation.
I don't know about that as you know part, but
no, you should know.
And thank you again for watching this on YouTube, listening on Spotify, following along on Instagram and Blue Sky. Until next time.